had some very big storms there, and one of them was the Great May ice storm.
Really?
That was the worst May ice storm in 104 years. And I had gone to stay in the house itself alone. And my husband had come out, and he was leaving. And I came back and I said, something's wrong. There's a very high tide and a big wind, and we are nowhere near high tide. And he said, you know, yesterday we were out on the marsh, and we both noticed there was nothing around, not a bird.
Really?
Nothing.
They just
around.
knew something was happening.
Something was up. And so fortunately I walked out, because that turned out to be one of the worst storms. And when I came back to the house, I waded in water up to my armpits to get into the house. So you knew that eventually the water from the marsh would come up under the house and float it.
Floated away.
Yeah.
Out west, there is a low-pressure area that we will keep an eye on, because right now it's rather harmless, but there are some indications as it moves to the east, some of the energy from that system will be transmitted to the coast. And by late Sunday and Sunday night, there could be some interesting things happening down the coast. Just too early to speculate about that, though, and how exactly it will affect us.
The thing is, there's a big upper air low dropping down right behind it, and all of the computer indications are that there's going to be a monster of a storm develop down in this region and then move slowly northeastward up the coast.
And it looks like a biggie. We'll have all the nasty details shortly.
Because the eye of the hurricane came over Cape Cod. And a friend of mine, of course the eye is clear, and they had sunlight during halfway through this great storm. And a friend of mine had gone down to the Coast Guard station and walked out the beach in the middle of this storm, and there sat the Outermost House in the marsh. And he said, I wish I could have thrown a net over it and saved it for you. Of course, it wasn't mine at all. I simply had been there a great deal. And I had hundreds of people write or call me and say, oh, your little house is gone. Well, it wasn't mine, and it did go out to sea like a great ship out the inlet on the second half of the storm. I'm not sorry. It was special, but it was a special environment that meant something, not the house, even though the house was a wonderfully built little one-person house.
So I took a ride down there just to evaluate what was going on, and as I was driving back, it was getting to be close to the high tide point. It was probably an hour or two before high tide. And one of the washovers that we had been experiencing was starting to see some seawater coming through from the ocean side into the marsh. I probably was the last person that drove back off that trail before the storm, because and I made it through that one spot and looked back, and 2 or 3 more waves put several feet of water through that area, and it was no longer passable. And then the storm continued to develop during the day. At sunset it was raging.
I was up in the cupola of the Coast Guard station and watched as the Outermost House lifted off its foundation and floated. It really wasn't destroyed. It kind of like floated into the marsh south, and then appeared to go, at least the main section of the building appeared to go out the inlet, out to sea, with other portions of the building washing in the backside of the marsh.
And all I could see was this ocean, which had seemed to have grown in size, literally, you know, it wasn't the waves, it was the tide, the actual size of the ocean was so huge, and it was washing right to the south of the Coast Guard station there. But as I looked out along Coast Guard Spit, all of these houses, there were 6 or 7 houses that were out there, it was all wrecked and washed away, and I couldn't really see down to the outermost. I think I could probably see down to the Outermost House, but believe me, the Outermost House was just one of several structures that were gone. So it was really even hard to tell when you looked down, it just that everything seemed to be gone.
I was stunned. I just said, "Jeez," because it was like 4 posts sticking out of a sandbar, and you go, "Wait a minute, that was in a dune," you know. No, that's the only way we could tell where it was the 4 posts. Just 4 posts sticking up, and it was like you were standing on a sandbar. There was nothing, absolutely nothing left of the dune where it had been. Nothing.
It was a somber time because, the community of folks is just like the folks now on the Chatham North Beach that are experiencing the same thing. It's a very tight-knit community, and it's a wonderful experience to be there and to have that kind of enjoyment. And to have it abruptly end like that is startling, to say the least. And of course, the history of the Outermost House and all of the people who have participated in that, makes that another order of magnitude more intense.
But to me, it was the greatest weather event I'd ever witnessed on the Cape, and remains so to this day, in terms of its scale, in terms of how it affected the community and the culture. Because not only was the Outermost House gone, it was almost fittingly, I guess, washed out to sea in this great natural event, which Henry Beston would have relished. But several other traditional cottages and camps and houses. I fortunately had been to the Outermost House several times before it was washed away, and I did a lot of walking down Coast Guard Spit, and I would always stop there. And that's when I learned about Henry Beston and realized that I wasn't the only one who thought the place was really special.
A lot of concern about that, because it had only been, 1964 that they had dedicated that as a national literary landmark, and they had Beston out there, and they had all the seashore personnel and took pictures and all of it. Well, when you take a look at it, it's 1964 to 1978, only made 14 years. That's it.
It's certainly a tribute to the story of the Outermost House and the forecastle that it wasn't destroyed by man. There was no human decision that we'll have to do something else with it, that it was built in place and stayed there until Mother Nature took it away. And now we continue to honor it with the stories. And certainly anybody having the opportunity to take a walk down that beach, and especially at this time of year. And people talk about the Cape being crowded and there's lots of people and tourists and all that. I'll tell you can be alone at the forecastle just as Beston was when he lived there. And all it takes is just a walk down there and sit. Take the book and sit down and read a few passages. It's mystical. It's truly mystical. It's one of the mystical places, and I've been all over the world. I've been to beaches all over the world, and it's truly one of the mystical places in the world. So you can see why Beston honored it with his book, and why it became a national literary landmark.